in conjunction with the article. So um, so why don't just to start, why don't you talk about your qualifications? Like I always tell people that you have a special Google certification that is not the one that you get online. It's like you had to go through the engineers
Yes,
at Google. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
yes. So that's more of a company qualification in a sense. So it's called a Google Analytics Certified Partner. So it's not on me personally. It's more on the company that we work with. So to become a Google certified partner, you need to submit a few case studies to Google and explain pretty much what you did, what was special about them, as well as you have an interview where they need to kind of assess your skills, kind of thing, as a company, and it also to continue to have that qualification. Your company needs to have X amount of users that are individually certified with Google Analytics. So yeah, so there's a bit of work getting it. It can be a bit painful sometimes. This is the third company that I've gotten that qualification with.
Okay.
It
It
used to be
takes about two
easier.
years, right? You said like 2 years?
Uh, it I think it depends.
Right.
Like you would need some historical data in the
Mm,
the cases that you're submitting in a sense.
hmm.
But it's not something that's done over a week in a sense. It's a bit of a tedious process. And the problem, I guess, now too is that there are quite a few certified companies around the world. So it's not easy becoming a certified partner anymore because again, Google believes they have enough of those partners, which means that yeah, they're kind of a bit. It's sometimes hard to become a new partner again, and we noticed that with the last company, it was more tedious than the previous ones where I've been part of it.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been working with Google Analytics uh, probably since 2005, I
Wow.
believe. First in Australia, then in Norway for a company there where we were the first Norwegian company to be certified in Google Tag Manager when that came out, as well as getting the Google Analytics certification for the company. And then after that, I moved back down to Australia, and from here on, I've worked with numerous companies, and gotten one of the qualifications through the company. I was head of tech, based out of Indonesia, where we worked with some pretty major Indonesian companies. And then now, for my last, I guess, close to 4 or 5 years now, I've been working with East out of Singapore, which is also a certified Google Analytics certified company. So
Great.
so yeah, so there's been a lot of Google Analytics. I've seen Google Analytics grow from Urchin to Google Analytics to yeah, all through the different stages of Google Analytics, and now through to from Universal Analytics through to GA4 as well, which is probably the biggest move they've done so far.
Mm,
Uh, to a lot of people's pain, I guess, because they're very
yeah.
used to the standard Google Analytics.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that. So that's very specifically, I have my own impressions, so I guess the first thing I would like to know is upgrading to Google Analytics 4 as easy as just adding the code to your website. And the reason I ask this is because we mentioned to our clients, hey, you need to make sure you're ready for this. And they're like, hey, we've done it. We've already added the code to our site. I suspect it's a little more complicated than that, and so I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yes, so I think it's a yes and no question answer to that. I think it really depends on your current implementation. So if you've got a very basic site where you don't track many goals, you don't have any custom implementation, so it's pretty much what you were tracking was sessions and page views and potentially a goal after a user has submitted a contact form where you kind of get to a receipt page. and then you track that URL on that receipt page as a conversion, then yes, it's pretty much just implementing the or adding the code to your site, and then you can pretty much get the same or even better tracking. But as soon as you go slightly customized, where you might have added custom dimensions and custom metrics to be able to track different user groups, to be able to to track different data that's not standard in universal analytics, then you're gonna struggle with the out of the box kind of migration or just by adding the script to the site. And the same also goes with events. So most sites, or at least most of the sites we work with, there would be some sort of complexity in the setup, and definitely after we've been through the sites, it'll be a lot more complexity. Not because we want to make it complex, but we want to make sure we can get the right data for our clients. And you wouldn't be able to do that with just by adding the tracking script to the site. You wouldn't be able to track specific events that you've set up, for example. It will be hard to kind of merge what you have in Universal Analytics straight over to GA4, because it's a very, very different setup in a sense. Universal Analytics is kind of session based. It's based on page views and events. When it comes to GA4, it's pretty much the only thing you have is events, but it's also more user centric. So you've got a lot of different events that are automatically collected when you add in the main script, but then you would have to define all the other events you want to track. And it's the same if you have e-commerce tracking, for example. There's definitely customization that is needed there. So most people that are using Google Analytics, just by adding in the script or doing the automatic migration, which Google is now kind of offering, you wouldn't get the same data, which means that it would be, you would need someone to, either yourself or someone else, to potentially help you making sure you get what you should get out of your reporting.
Do you have an example of one of these, just so people can get a sense of whether or not it applies to them, what might be considered a complex metric to track?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Yeah, so let's say if you for example have a custom dimension that gets set for a specific type of user, for example, that has a definition behind it, where if a user has spent X amount of time on your site, for example, then that user can be defined as a reader, for example, compared to a scanner. It's one example. To kind of implement that in GA4, you would kind of need to use similar logic to what you used in Universal Analytics, but again, it would needs to be set up again in a sense. The same goes if you're tracking anything from, I wouldn't say user IDs, even though you would also track that as custom dimensions, but I'm just trying to find a good example now, Ash.
That's fine.
What about in the morning here now?
Yeah. I get it. Same here. So, what about trying to, because I think that one of the key differences is about reporting, right? We're talking about the reporting side, and if you step back from the reporting side, then it's how it's tracked and then how it's reported. So maybe on the reporting side, I'm thinking of if you want to be reporting how many people are coming in through referral channels and making a purchase on the website via referral channels, would that be a metric that would require some customization from GA4?
Not tracking the traffic from the referral channels. That would essentially be a better tracking in GA4 than you have in Universal Analytics, because in GA4 it's more user-based than session-based. So you would be able to see the actual touch points that the user has done to get to your site, or even looking at ways to conversion. If you've set up a conversion on your site, for example, you can just out of the box, you can look at user acquisition or traffic acquisition. So user acquisition is initially where Google believes the user came from, and then traffic acquisition is more based on the user session, even though GA4 isn't really session based. But it gives you, I guess, two quite easily or quick and easy reports to see how the user is actually coming to your site, both based on the current session and also where Google actually puts it as on the user level, in a sense. So that would be there, but again, depending on what the conversion is or what really the goal is, that's kind of where you would struggle, and where you would most likely need some custom implementation added in there, for example. When it comes to GA4 as well, everything is an event, and the event has definitions or dimensions or metrics attached to them, and the data that you might just get in if you set up a few custom events, which you can do through GA4, not by actually doing it like programming it into the site or using Google Tag Manager on it. You can still set up your own custom events inside of GA4, but being able to add the custom definitions or the dimension that is important for you to enrich that data is something that doesn't come out of the box and would need some extra implementation, and that can be anything from, like, for example, in Google Analytics, you used to have event category, event label, event action. That is no longer used in GA4, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should use it, because you can quite easily do it by defining that yourself inside of the custom definition section. But again, it allows you to change it around more, so it can be more customized towards what makes sense for the different use case. So instead of having, let's say, event category, the event itself potentially could be the category name, and then you could have a definition for the action, which might be the same for a lot of the actual name might be the same, but then you would have the actual value would change. So you could then build funnels based on one specific event, and then have it more granularly when it comes to the actual dimensions that you add to it.
So you could have a category like landing page, and then I want to get the right terminology, but then it would be like calls to action, and then, or sorry, the action would be like click button, and then specifically underneath that you could have a value for the top one, the second one, or the third one. That generally how that would break down.
So if you look at a form, for example, a sign up form or a contact form on the website, and you want to track the user's interaction with that form, the form might open up in a Lightbox or in a Moodle, for example. You would have a potentially, again, you don't have to do it this way, but you could set it up where the event is called, let's say, sign up form, and then you would then have potentially, instead of calling it event action, you could call it user action, or you could call it user interaction, whatever would make sense for you. But then you would have, if the user clicks the close button, for example, then that action or the value for that action could be close sign up flow. When the user has completed the name field in the form, you could then fire off another event called name, for example, or email if it's the email field, or you could have another event firing off with the first interaction, for example. If you wanted to track when users are actually interacting with the form, you would then also, you can then have another dimension added to that called, let's say, input check, for example, to see if the input that the user has filled in is valid. Again, you shouldn't track real emails or real personal data. You wouldn't be allowed to. You can, but you might get punished and it might take the account away from you. So it's definitely something we wouldn't recommend.
Mm.
And then you can pretty much set up a flow of everything that's important to track in that form, to kind of see the user actions going through it and see where users are falling off, what they might struggle with. And then at the end, you could still even use the same event name called sign up, or whatever we call it. And then you could have the action being a successful sign up, and then you could potentially from that event create another event inside of GA4 called sign up, which is kind of the event that Google uses as a recommended event that they wanted to use. And that's another thing too. Google has quite a few recommended events in the new setup, which like sign up, login, and quite a few other ones, which is definitely recommended to use if you can use them, if it makes sense to use them, because down the track there might potentially be a lot more reporting around these events, and if you're already tracking them, it's kind of going to give you potentially better data in the reports, by kind of following what they recommend you to do.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying is it provides not only a greater level of detail in what you can track, but it's also easier to set up those tracking parameters for reporting.
Yeah, so you could use, now you could use, if you wanted to, you could use 20 of these kind of parameters per event if you wanted to, if it would make sense. In most cases, it wouldn't make sense, but so it means that you're no longer locked to using event category, event action, and an event label,
Which was just one.
and event value. So
Right, you could only do one
yeah,
per.
which was kind of the old hierarchy. Yes, you could
Right.
also previously use custom dimensions in those events. So, but the new structure is a lot more, it's a lot more solid in that sense when it comes to the event structure, and it allows each user or each client to kind of set up the structure that works well with them in a sense. So you could set up pretty much anything through these events, whatever would make sense for each use case. So that's why
the event storing is more solid and structured, and therefore recalling these things is more powerful because you can actually recall multiple things in your report more easily.
Yeah, exactly. And it also allows you to customize it more towards your needs compared to following what, like the structure that was previously set out in Universal Analytics. But with that too, though, the planning becomes a lot more important too, because it can get quite messy if you don't have a setup plan from when you start all this tracking, because you can get, when you have a lot more, when everything is a lot more open in a sense, it's quite easy for you to potentially add in events that you think make sense, but because you haven't planned them out correctly, it might make your data harder to read down the track, because you haven't, the plan of your tracking hasn't been set out the way it potentially should have been set out initially. And that's also another thing too, is you could quite easily set up a very similar tracking that what you have in Universal Analytics with GA4, where you could set up your own parameters for event action, event label, event category, and pretty much continue setting out your reports, or at least the tracking of the events like what you used to have in Universal Analytics. But again, should you? That's the other question, because it's changed now, and you could potentially set it up in a lot better structure that would make more sense for your business. I guess the problem is that it's to get into that mindset and actually spending the time trying to restructure the account in the best possible way for the different client. And the way we usually do that is that we almost try to, we obviously look at the main KPIs, the conversion events, which is kind of where you want to get to, but then you would have other flows that will kind of get you into those. So kind of more like conversion flow events, for example, or supporting events. And how would each of those different flows look when you're kind of planning it out? So setting up a detailed kind of event map is something that we think is extremely important before doing too much implementation, I guess. So you
I'm
kind of have the
thinking,
plan set up before you
yeah,
jump into it.
thinking about like a real world case, you know, where it sounds like the either marketing manager, marketing director, strategist needs to have a clear understanding of how this tracking works, the key parameters, and work with a technical specialist like yourself to make sure that they understand how that report is going to be generated. Because I feel like, you know, one of the maybe it's a just the nature of the beast, but a lot of the marketing managers are not technically savvy to be thinking about all of these things, and they just want the visual reported
Yeah,
to them.
exactly. Yeah.
So I could
Yes,
see a little
and
bit
you
of a
can get, yeah, yeah. So I think it depends. Like, what's the point of your tracking? Is it just to track the
Mhm.
conversions and see where the users are coming from, or do you want to try to improve the conversion funnel as well? Do you want to try to find out where the users are falling off? What are they not doing that you want them to do, and how can you improve that?
Right,
And how can you find out about it? And the way you
right,
can find out about it is that if you have a solid tracking foundation in place, it's going to make it a lot easier uh, for your UX team, for example, to understand what might not be working and what is working. It's also going to make it easier for your media team to understand where the different users are falling off from, let's say Facebook or
mhm,
TikTok or Google Ads for that matter, and then
mhm.
potentially what can we do to improve those areas where we're seeing them they're falling off. See if they can complete the whole funnel or move them at least one more step further to the end goal.
So the difference is, you know, whether they are um, just reporting versus analyzing and trying to make growth improvements for the future, then this type of detail helps really. I imagine you can provide A/B testing on different KPIs as well, and very specifically test out different parameters and like micro improve that
Yes,
conversion funnel.
yes, and that's also unfortunately, or it might not be unfortunately, but that is also changing at the moment.
Okay.
So Google has put a lot of money into Google Optimize over the
Mhm.
last 5 to 8 years. I might
Mhm.
be wrong on the timeline, but that is now going away as well.
Mhm.
So Google Optimize is pretty much the A/B testing or the optimization tool where you can potentially show a different version of your site or change different elements on the site based on where the users are coming from, or just do a complete like a split A/B test, for example, on the user group. So that is a tool that Google is sunsetting a couple of months after they are sunsetting Universal Analytics, but it is highly likely that these tools are going to be more integrated into GA4 instead. So they're not going away, but we don't know enough about it yet to see what those implications might be moving forward. But it is definitely something that is still going to be available, but it'll be part of GA4 instead. But we don't know
Yeah,
exactly what that's going to look like yet because Google's keeping that very, very close to their chest.
that's shocking.
Yep. So
Because a lot of people
it's
rely on
all
that. I know
changing.
we've done that in the past together, and that was a huge
Yep.
benefit. We've been able to use that to show a lot of growth for customers. Wow, that's pretty shocking. So then in the future, if they don't have a substitute, something like HubSpot, you can integrate GA4 with and check the different, I guess the A/B tests
Yeah.
that you can
So
run via HubSpot.
so there are, so there are definitely other tools also, like Visual Website Optimizer is out there. Optimizely is another one,
Yeah.
like, and they all kind of work in the same way. But I guess the exciting thing when GA4 came out with Google Optimize is that you didn't have to be a Google Analytics 360 customer, which is the premium version, to be able to use Google segments inside of Google Optimize, which is something that anyone with GA4 can still use. But again, you don't have much time left. But it means that you could set up your own segment inside of GA4 and then push that segment to Google Optimize and then target that segment specifically. So it made it a lot easier to do more of the fine-tuning testing, I guess, on specific audiences instead of the way it is for the Universal Analytics non-paid customers. So, but again, I'll be very surprised if there isn't something very similar that's going to come into GA4. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see with exactly what that is, because there will be something. But again, as you mentioned, you have other tools like HubSpot that potentially could fill that void. But again, the integration with the Google Analytics data is obviously key as well, or makes it a lot easier to do these tests too.
So just a kind of basic question, because we went really heavy into technical, so maybe give people a breather. So basics, what kind of business would need to be careful when upgrading to Google Analytics 4?
I think anyone, so it would be any e-commerce site, 100%. Any site where you're actually you're getting a revenue from your site, or it is your business in a sense. Any site that actually has some custom tracking and that is using Google Analytics on a weekly to daily basis. Anyone who kind of relies heavily on their website and is actually wanting to improve it, some customization is strongly recommended to get better data. So it as soon as you have any type of customization, you would need to do some changes to or like some implementation to get the GA4 to work as you want it to work. That being said, you are getting extra tracking that wasn't in place with Universal Analytics. In most cases, depending on how you're adding in video, for example, video interactions are pretty much automatically tracked. Scroll tracking is sort of automatically tracked. They only track when the user gets to 90%. If you wanted more of scrolling the page, if you wanted more granularly, then you would have to do some custom implementation there. Outbound clicks is now automatically tracked. So there are and that file downloads as well. So there are definitely some improvements there without having to do any custom implementation. But again, it doesn't fit every case. So
just to clarify,
if you're earning money on this, yes,
90% of the entire page, or 90% of above the fold.
90%. No, so there's one scroll event firing off automatically now on every page, unless you turn it off, and that's when the user gets to 90% of the length of the page.
Yeah, that's not as helpful as it sounds, I think. Yeah.
So if you have a very long page, it's not very helpful. If you got a very short page, it's not really helpful. It's more like an event that tells you that the user has reached the bottom.
Especially if you have a lot of content in the front of the, at the top, and I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So that's in one of these cases where customization would be important to bring in, like 25% of the page, 10% of the page, that kind of thing, more granular. Okay.
Exactly. Another sad thing is that the kind of the loading speed reports that you had in Universal Analytics, they're going away in a sense. You're not getting the page speed insights. Google is saying that you can use the tools on the Google Dev side in a sense, the Lighthouse tracking or like the Lighthouse add-on that you have in the Chrome developer tools, for example. But again, it makes it hard for a lot of users to use that to see how their pages are working as intended. And the problem as well is that it's not using real user data to track the the potential loading speeds or the potential issues that your site might be facing, because it's kind of the Google bot that's in use. But again, there are customizations there as well that can be set up where you can fire off different events to make sure you get that information as well, and you can make it a lot better than what you had in Universal Analytics, which is quite exciting as well. But again, it takes a bit of implementation to do that.
Okay, that's a good distinction.
Because that's one thing that which can be quite powerful, especially when you're trying to find out why things aren't potentially working as well. It might be because the page takes too long to load, or it might be other issues like content layout shifts. There might be, and these things as well are also affecting your ranking in Google as well. So it's definitely something that you should be on top of. And by firing off these custom events, you could potentially fix all these issues before they become a big issue as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's
okay.
That's another thing that would take a bit of time to dive into as well. I'm not sure if we're going to have that much time to talk about that now.
Maybe not. Yeah. So what do you think is the number one surprise people have when they hear why upgrading to Google Analytics 4 is essential? Setting aside that Google Analytics 3 is going away, why is it better, I guess, and what are you hearing people are surprised, oh, this is going to help, that kind of thing is what I'm looking for.
So I think what people are most surprised about is potentially how Google has done this, because Universal Analytics, or GA3, is been around for so long. It's what pretty much everyone is using or have been using, and Google is always, and you've seen it on the cookie policies as well, that they always kind of extend their deadlines. And I don't think anyone thought last year that Google was going to be firm on the end of June 2023 date, where if you haven't done anything, you're pretty much screwed. You're not gonna have any more data. So I think that's probably what most people are surprised about, that there is no extension unless you're a premium customer. So that's kind of the biggest one. I think, at least, that they've done this push, and especially with GA4 as well, which it's a very good tool, and it's getting better every day. But I still feel like there's a lot of things or small things missing that potentially should have been there. So I think delaying it with a year would have definitely been my recommendation if I could give one, in a sense.
Yeah,
because it is very, very different.
Right. I mean, there's so much. My general feeling, and when I've talked to people, I think that Google has done a really poor job of communicating this change, what it means to people. It seems that they're reporting that something is changing and you need to upgrade. But there hasn't been a lot of talk about why it's better, why you should do it, anything, why it's important, what's going to happen if you don't do it. I mean, most of that information I find out from you. And had I not spoken to you, I wouldn't have that information. And that's crazy to me.
Yeah, so it is going to be like, one of the great things about GA4 is that it puts the user in center instead of the sessions, in a sense. So it's going to be a lot easier for users to see the user unified. So you would see that in the reports, that it's highly likely that your user, like if nothing else happens with your traffic, your user count is going to go down, because you're going to have more returning users, for example, because that part of GA4 is a lot better than what you had in Universal Analytics. But a big issue that I see, especially with smaller sites and also sites with quite a lot of traffic, is that there's a lot of what Google called thresholding applied to the reports, which means that it's not that easy to find the data that you're seeing isn't necessarily as accurate as what you used to see it in Universal Analytics, which means that a lot of the sessions might potentially be removed, or a lot of the events might be removed for you to see in the reports. It's not like it's not tracking, but it's that Google doesn't want to show it to you because they're worried that you might be able to identify the different users, which is quite frustrating when you're working on quite granular reports. Sometimes when you're trying to dig into the data and try to find out where the users are falling off, what they're doing, it can sometimes become quite tedious if you just rely on GA4 itself. And also, and the problem as well is that thresholding also gets, if you use Looker Studio, which used to be called Google Data Studio, if you use that for your reporting as well, the data inside of Looker Studio is also going to have that thresholding applied, which means that you're gonna, on the areas of your site where there are not that many events firing off, for example, or it might get too granular, Google is going to hide that information from you, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
Unless you bite the bullet and integrate Google BigQuery as well, which is definitely recommended for quite a few reasons, but it stops the thresholding being an issue. It also allows you to have historical data because then you own the data. While we, and that's another problem with GA4 is that the lifetime of the historical data is a lot shorter than it used to be.
So let's talk about that, because that's I think this is one of the craziest things that I heard. So let's talk about historical data. You know, the two main factors: the shortening of the historical data to the maximum, and the other is the default settings that people need to be careful about when they're implementing. So
yeah, so it's not like you're losing the data, but you're losing I think the granularity of the data in a sense. So when you add in all these custom dimensions and custom metrics, for example, that data is not going to be stored for long in GA4. So you would still get some modeling of the data visible for a longer period of time, but it would be a lot more limited than what it is in Universal Analytics, which means that you're not going to be able to do the same historical analysis that you were used to, for example. And yeah, the standard or the default selection there is 2 months, I believe, which is crazy, and the longest, I believe, is 18 months. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's right. 14 or 18, yes. I can't remember which, but yeah.
And it's I think it's a way for Google to save on server costs, to be honest with you.
That's exactly what I thought as well. I mean, it just sounds like server cost issues, but upgrading to BigQuery, for example, would overcome that challenge.
Yeah, because then all the data would be stored in BigQuery, which means that the data is yours. You pay for storage costs there. They're minuscule at first. They're a lot of, even with sites with very high traffic volumes, you might not get a bill from BigQuery for years. That being said, it might be different from client to client depending on the data that they send in there. But there's one thing sending the data through to BigQuery. There's another thing using that data, because again, the way that data is structured in BigQuery, it's not always that easy even to get the custom data that you might want to get out of those reports without trying to flatten the data first to then be able to access all those dimensions. So yes, the data is stored, but it might not be usable for you until you make some changes to it, in a sense.
I see.
Okay. But again, so it's amazing that everyone can now get or if you're a GA4 customer, anyone can get the BigQuery integration. It didn't used to be like that. It used to be only the premium customers that were able to do that. But connecting BigQuery it's not that hard. It's pretty much almost a click and approve flow, in a sense. So it's quite simple. It is more being able to make that data usable, which which requires a bit of technical expertise to make sure you can use the data in the way you want to.
Okay,
And then obviously
good.
also monitoring the potential costs that might have. So,
Yeah.
but it's amazing that it's available, because it means that you can join the data a lot more easily with other data that you might have to kind of enrich that data even further, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, that's good. So the other crazy shocker to me is something we talked about before, and I don't know if it's still true at this moment. So maybe you can clarify that Google wouldn't be, you can't really integrate the historical data from GA3 with GA4. It's hard to get reports with that merging of that data.
Yes, so they will be in as far as I know, there'll be two separate properties. So you wouldn't be able to, like, so, and this is why there was a big push in June last year that if you want to have 1 year of historical data to do your analysis, you need to get your act together and implement GA4 now.
Yeah.
You will be able to access the GA3 or Universal Analytics property for, I think, at least 3 to 4 months after it stops recording data. You might be able to have it for longer as well, potentially, but right now I believe it's September or October, which is the deadline when they'll actually turn off those properties, and after that you can't access that data anymore.
And that's insane
So,
to me because I've heard nobody has said this clearly,
yeah,
in my opinion, from Google. And I think this would come as a shock to a lot of people who either haven't changed it over, they're just thinking, hey, I've got a couple months before I need to do
yeah,
this. And additionally, there's zero warnings that I've seen that Google 3 data will be going away. They say Google 3 analytics will be going away,
is
but they
going
don't
away.
say the
Yeah,
data
yeah,
will be going away.
yeah. No, there's yeah, and they're quite pushy to get you to do the automatic integration, which I think happened now on 1st of March if you didn't stop it. And again, yeah, there hasn't been much talk from there, at least unless you really look for it, about that you're not going to be able to access your old data after a specific date. So yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a bit it's a shame, and especially for a lot of people who value that data.
Yeah.
But there are obviously ways you can export that data and kind of store it and still use it for historical data. The best way to do that would be to integrate BigQuery with Universal Analytics as well. But again, there's no, unless you're a paying customer, there is no kind of automatic bridge between Universal Analytics and BigQuery. So there would have to be kind of a custom setup there to be able to export that data. And our recommendations there is that you shouldn't export everything. You should look at the data and look at what you need for your historical analysis to save on dev time to get it exported, but also to save on BigQuery space as well. There's no point bringing in too much data if it's not going to be used, but you need to make sure that you have what you need at least.
So in that case, a consultant can help guide, if they're not sure what needs to be brought in. And I think that's a good segue for, that we really promote like the Remark Radar dashboard. And with a dashboard like this, we can bring in historical data from GA3, integrate it with GA4, spit out reports in real time that will certainly easier than using the Google Analytics for property and more specific to the needs that you have for marketing efforts.
Yeah, definitely, because again, the new reports in GA4 too, they might not be, or they're a bit different to what you have in Universal Analytics. I wouldn't say that they're better or worse, but I feel like they're very different. So you can't go to the same place to find the same information that you used to. It's more digging that is needed. They got a new section called Explore, which can be quite powerful, but it is also quite painful. It's hard to share them, and if you share those reports with other users in the property, it's a read-only share. You can share, so they can't edit it, but they can make a copy of it and make their own changes. But then they have to share it again. I find the sidebar quite tedious to work with sometimes. It takes up too much space. But you can do some amazing reporting there. But it is quite tedious. A lot of the times with our clients too, they do enjoy just logging onto Looker Studio and getting a custom report with all the information that they kind of need to make the decisions that they need to make for their business. So that's definitely something we're going to continue to use.
Exactly. And I think a reminder that Google Analytics is not the end all be all of reporting when it comes to your information, because as we've worked with clients in the past, they have supply chain, you may be wanting to track 3PL things in there, Amazon, all of those things in one place. Google Analytics will not do that for you. And so you need to have some sort of third-party solution for that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's again where with GA4, the data can become a lot more accurate because it's easier to connect GA4 with BigQuery, and you could import all that information into BigQuery before you create reports on it. So all the data is consolidated in one place to even get better reporting than what people potentially used to get with Universal Analytics.
I assume
so yeah.
Yeah, I'm going back to the data collection and losing the data, and I keep thinking about this, like I assume some people might be watching this or reading this article 6 months from now, and they're like, "Oh my God, I lost my data. Can they get it back? Is there any way to recover this data once it's gone?"
That's a good question. I don't believe so. It's obviously that would be a question for Google Analytics themselves. I don't think it will be. I think they're going to be quite relieved on their side when they can free up all the space.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I think once it's gone, it's gone. You don't own that data. That data is there on their servers. So yeah,
Okay, good to know.
if you
All
don't
right.
access it in time, yeah.
Thank you. All right. So last question here, kind of like a two-parter, maybe a three-parter power question is Google Analytics 4 very simply better than Google Analytics 3?
I think it will become better. I think it's very different just because the way it's set up. It is more. I guess it's more relating to the times we're in now compared to when Universal Analytics was first created. Lots have changed how people are using different devices to access websites and apps, etc. So it gives a lot better unified picture of the users themselves. So it is definitely something that is set up for not for now necessarily, but for moving forward and kind of evolving with the way that the internet is working. So it is definitely going in the right way, but potentially it's gone slightly too quickly in the last year, I think. So yeah, so it's definitely better in that sense. The user reporting is better. The e-commerce reporting is currently not better. The enhanced e-commerce tracking that you currently have in Universal Analytics makes it easier for you to see the different reports based on the whole customer journey on the e-commerce side. I definitely think that's going to change in GA4 as long as you have a correct implementation in place. I would be very surprised if you don't see those reports improve over the next over the next year or so, at least. But again, yeah, it is what it is. It is
Yeah,
changing how we work with Google Analytics, and it is
right.
going to be, once we're over this hurdle, it is going to, I believe, improve the data
Yeah, it
for
sounds
most of our
like
clients as long as they get it implemented.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, using maybe a weightlifting metaphor, it sounds like the skeletal frame is bigger and can take on more weight, but it's still just a skeleton at this point. It needs more meat on it to really become a, a powerful machine that it's intended to be.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's necessarily where it should be to turn off Universal Analytics yet.
Mm.
But yeah, it is going to. Well, we don't have a choice, but yeah, it is going to
Right.
become better than
So,
Universal Analytics, and also in a lot of ways, it is already better as well.
okay.
But you have those things that currently doesn't seem like they're thought through that well yet.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
but hopefully
maybe
they'll get
just
there soon.
quickly three points that it's three ways it's better.
Uh, it is better specifically for when it comes to looking at the users as a whole,
Okay.
tracking users across app and web together. That is something that was a bit of a struggle in Universal Analytics. Now
Right.
with the different data streams from apps and web makes that a lot better. The structure of the events makes more sense in a sense to what's in Universal Analytics once you get used to it.
Mm.
The explore functionality, those custom reports that you can set up there are a lot more powerful than what you had in Universal Analytics under the custom reporting tab. It allows you to build funnels, which you were only able to do in the premium version of Google Analytics. It's got quite a few other really good reports as well. Behavior flow. It is so it's easy to dig down in the data in that sense. I think that section still needs a bit of work, to be honest with you, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. It's more similar to what you have in Adobe Analytics, I believe, on that side,
Mm-hmm.
where you can build your own reports. It's also and another really good thing is that it also allows you to customize the standard reports as well that you see in the in your account, where you can, let's say, if you don't have an e-commerce site, you can remove all the e-commerce metrics that doesn't make sense to you, so they're not cluttering up the screen for you.
Right, right.
You can also, so there's quite a lot of, that's just one example, but yeah, there's a lot more there that can be done compared to what was in Universal Analytics, in a sense.
That's great. Thank you.
Uh,
Um,
yeah,
is that three? I thought it's like the user. Uh, I think I lost track of that.
I
There was
yeah,
tracking across devices.
and the
Yeah.
other big thing though is
Explore.
obviously the the BigQuery integration.
Hmm.
Is also something that has been missing from Universal Analytics, which is amazing that it's
Okay.
now available for everyone who uses GA4.
Great. All right. So final question. So for anyone who's learning GA4, and this can include analysts, marketing directors, um, business owners, small business owners. What do you think is going to be the number one hurdle for them adapting to the new system?
I think using the new interface, it's going to be hard for them to find the reports that they're used to, find the data that they're used to seeing with the new cards that they have now compared to what they've been using for years. There's a bit of a learning curve there, I think, at least. How things have been moved around slightly. So that's probably be the biggest thing. The other thing is that you need to change your mindset slightly to move away from bounce rate and sessions, and more look at active users and engaged sessions instead. So engaged sessions is almost like an inverted bounce rate in a sense. So bounce rate is something that was huge in Universal Analytics to see if a page was working or if an ad campaign was working. Now you don't really have bounce rate anymore in Universal Analytics. So now it's more looking at engaged sessions instead of that, in a sense. But again, it doesn't mean you can't create your own bounce rate out of that if that's something that you still want to keep using. Which you can do inverse quite easily in Looker Studio.
Okay, that's very helpful. I think somebody, maybe us, need to create a one-to-one map of what used to be versus what it is now and how to find it. There should be some sort of, you would hope Google would do this, but I suspect that's not going to come from Google.
No, potentially not.
Right. Well, thank you, Mattis. I really appreciate the time this morning. I know you were rushing around today, so I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm sure I'm going to have some follow-up questions for you, but
no problems at all, Ash.
Yeah, this was helpful for me. I feel like because I know there are problems and it's hard for me to communicate it to clients, but I think, the way you described it, I think this is well, number one, there are problems that people are going to encounter. There are opportunities. We always want to look at opportunities. And the third thing is that there are surprises that people don't know about and need to be warned about, particularly the loss of data, I think is really crucial that people know about. So, yeah, thank you.
No problems at all.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to stop here. Let me